is NewsBits on Fuxion TV. Here are the headlines. South Sudan's political trial starts in Juba. President Zuma gives South Africa a pass mark. UN launches human rights probe in Central African Republic. Uganda's anti-gay law challenged in court. Libya's former prime minister leaves country despite travel ban. Issa Hayatou sets World Cup target for Africa's Big Five. These and more when we return. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a minute. Hello and thanks for joining us on this edition of NewsBits on Fuxion TV. I'm Nike Roberts. 4 top South Sudanese politicians have gone on trial on charges of treason. Pagan Amoum, former Secretary General of the ruling Sudan People's Liberation Movement, SPLM, Oyai Denga Jack, former National Security Minister, Majak Dagut, former Deputy Defense Minister, and Ezekiel Lol Gatuk, a former ambassador to the US, have been accused of inciting the army and fueling an insurgency in South Sudan when a rebellion broke out in the country in December. This was their first court appearance since their arrest. The accused held senior posts in the governing party SPLM before falling out with President Salva Kiir. James Mayen, the lead prosecutor in the case, told the court he has enough evidence to prove the suspects attempted to overthrow the government. He cited as a key piece of evidence a press release that Riek Machar issued days before violence erupted. In the release, Machar and other political figures accused Kiir of having dictatorial tendencies and of making decisions without consulting other SPLM officials. Mayen said he also has an audio recording of a conversation between the suspects on the night violence broke out in Juba, which showed that Machar had ordered soldiers to break into the armory and take back the guns that they had been ordered to hand over. The accused politicians had previously denied the charges, which carry the maximum sentence of death, but have not yet pleaded to the 11 charges read out in court. Conflict broke out in Juba December 15 between troops loyal to President Salva Kiir and those of his former deputy Riek Machar. Over 1,000 people have been killed and hundreds of thousands more have been displaced. A ceasefire agreement was signed on January 23rd, but sporadic fighting has continued in the country. The United Nations has launched a human rights investigation into the violence in the Central African Republic. The chair of the investigation, Bernard Acho-Muna, a lawyer from Cameroon who was deputy chief prosecutor for the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, stated that he and former Mexican Secretary of Foreign Affairs Jorge Castaneda and Mauritanian human rights lawyer Fatimata Mbaye will fly to the capital Bangui. At a press conference in Geneva, Mr. Muna said the hate propaganda in CAR was similar to that in Rwanda before the 1994 genocide that killed about 800,000 people. We don't wait until genocide is committed and then call for prosecution, he said. The investigation was slated to begin on Tuesday. Tens of thousands of Muslims have fled as Christian militias stepped up their attacks since the forced resignation of CAR's first Muslim ruler, Michel Djotodia, in January. The militias claim to be taking revenge for atrocities committed by mainly Muslim rebels after Mr. Djotodia seized power in March 2013. Interim President Catherine Samba-Panza has appealed for an end to the bloodshed, but with little success. Many Muslims have crossed the borders into neighboring Cameroon and Chad, while thousands more are living in camps inside Central African Republic. Libya's former Prime Minister Ali Zidane has left the country despite a travel ban. Shortly after Mr. Zidane lost the confidence motion in the General National Congress, GNC, Libya's Prosecutor General Ridwan Abdul Qadir reportedly instructed the head of the passport agency to add the former Prime Minister's name to a watch list and to prevent him from travel until he was brought to questioning. MPs voted to dismiss Mr. Zidane and replace him with Defense Minister Abdullah Altini on Tuesday. Mr. Zidane was dismissed by Parliament on Tuesday following reports that North Korean flagged tanker Morning Glory had escaped from the Sidra oil terminal with at least 234,000 barrels of crude. Mr. Zidane had earlier insisted that the Libyan authorities had complete control of the tanker. Malta's Prime Minister Joseph Muscat told state-owned TVM television that Mr. Zidane had spent 2 hours in the country late on Tuesday while his plane was refueled on the island. Mr. Muscat added that his plane then left for another European country. Libya has been plagued by instability since the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, with the government struggling to assert its authority over armed groups that helped topple him. 7 people have died and about 60 more are injured in a gas explosion that caused the collapse of 2 New York apartment buildings. Search crews picked through rubble on Thursday looking for survivors. Several firefighters, police officers, and a team from the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, were at the Upper Manhattan scene to determine what had caused the explosion on Wednesday, shortly after a resident had called the utility company Con Edison to complain about the smell of gas. The Safety Board investigates accidents involving natural gas. 5 people remained missing on Thursday morning, according to New York Police Detective Martin Speechley. Passers-by wore dust masks or wrapped their faces in winter scarves to limit inhalation of dust and smoke. Mayor Bill de Blasio said a preliminary investigation indicated the explosion in East Harlem was caused by a gas leak. Nearly 6 days after Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared after departing Kuala Lumpur International Airport en route Beijing, the mystery deepens as authorities try to piece puzzles together. The plane was carrying 239 people, 227 passengers, and 12 crew members. There are 13 nationalities represented on board. More than half are Chinese or Taiwanese. Other passengers were from Malaysia, India, Indonesia, Australia, the United States, France, New Zealand, Ukraine, Canada, Russia, Italy, Austria, and the Netherlands. The plane is a Boeing 777-200ER. The aircraft has an excellent safety record. The expected trip length was roughly 2,700 miles, approximately 4,350 kilometers. It was expected to land in Beijing at 6:30 a.m. The crew members are Malaysian. The pilot is Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a 53-year-old veteran with 18,365 flying hours who joined Malaysia Airlines in 1981. The first officer, Farik Ab Hamid, 27, has 2,763 flying hours. Hamid started at the airline in 2007. After search crews failed to find any trace of debris suggested by Chinese satellite photographs, Malaysian officials on Thursday said there was no evidence to back a newspaper report suggesting the plane may have kept flying for 4 hours after its last reported contact. The pilots did not indicate any problem to the tower, and no distress signal was issued. It was earlier reported that 2 passengers boarded the plane using stolen passports. Authorities have identified them as Puri Nouri Mohammadi, 18, and Delavar Sayed Mohammed, 29, both Iranians. The use of the stolen passports had raised concern that the people who used them might be involved in the plane's disappearance, but officials have said they think it is unlikely that the Iranian men had links to terrorist groups. Authorities have not ruled out the possibility the plane continued to fly, however, and given the lack of evidence, all options remain on the table. Ugandan rights activists and politicians have filed a legal challenge to overturn a tough anti-gay law recently signed by President Yoweri Museveni. The Civil Society Coalition on Human Rights and Constitutional Law, which represents about 50 groups, filed the petition in the Constitutional Court, asking for the law to be annulled. The petition said the law violated the rights of gay people and subjected them to cruel and inhuman punishment. Also, that several cases of violence and retaliation have been reported since it was signed last month. The petition asks the courts to block the enforcement of the law and prevent Ugandan media outlets and websites from publishing the names and pictures of those who are open about their sexual orientation or suspected of being gay. The law makes allowance for life imprisonment as the penalty for acts of aggravated homosexuality also criminalizes the promotion of homosexuality. The sponsor of the law, MP David Bahati, insists that homosexuality is a behavior that can be learned and can be unlearned. Several European nations, including Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and Sweden, have cut aid to Uganda to show their opposition to the law. We'll be back with more news bits after these messages. Stay tuned. Welcome back. At an International Women's Day celebration in Monrovia, Liberia recently, African Women's Network for Community Management of Forests, RIFACOF, and Liberia's Foundation for Community Initiatives, FCI, presented a statement on reform recommendations to Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. The statement urged the president to include clear safeguards and specifics on how women's rights to own, access, use, and control land would be recognized and protected in Liberia's new land law currently being vetted by Liberia's Internal Vetting Committee. RIFACOF President Cecile Njebet stressed the importance of securing women's rights to land and providing equal protection of these rights to enhancing women's status and accelerating prosperity in Liberia and across Africa. Land conflicts in Liberia remain the single most explosive issue, and should these recommendations come to pass, they could propel land equality and greater gender equality across the region, especially in countries such as Cameroon, Côte d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Senegal, where land reform processes are just beginning. Speaking at the event, President Sirleaf said women have to be there to play and to be in to win. And she said if women want women's representation, they need to put them there through their votes. As tensions rise over the delay by the Zambian government in releasing the country's draft constitution, the focus is on Parliament to help resolve the logjam. Pressure began mounting recently when opposition members of Parliament disrupted parliamentary business for 2 days, demanding that the Parliament should address the issue of the constitution-making process. The MPs were not satisfied by the update given in Parliament by Justice Minister Winter Kabimba on the process. Kabimba had told the House that the delay in releasing the draft constitution was caused by the technical committee, which he said took the draft to his office instead of the president's. Since independence in 1964, Zambia has had 5 presidents and 4 constitutions. This would be the 5th national charter, and it is called a people-driven constitution, which would allow a president to take power only after winning an outright 50+% of the vote, among other things. President Sata promised a new constitution as far back as his election in 2011, and a draft was finished months ago. He won the presidency in 2011 with 42% of the votes. That figure, however, would not get him into power under the new constitution. It would require a second runoff election between the top scoring parties from round 1 if there was no outright winner. At a recent event, President Sata reiterated his government's commitment to the constitutional review process. President Jacob Zuma on Tuesday described South Africa as a success story at an event where he launched South Africa's 20-year review document. The report describes how South Africa has progressed in realizing the objectives of reconstruction and development since the dawn of democracy in 1994. In his statement at the launch, President Zuma said that in spite of the enormous challenges still facing the country 2 decades after the birth of democracy, South Africa is a good story. We have succeeded because of the hard work of all our people who contributed in various ways to rebuilding their country, he said. Addressing senior government officials, business executives, analysts, and media representatives at the Presidential Guest House in Pretoria, he noted that government had inherited enormous backlogs in the infrastructure required to deliver services, including the provision of public health services and basic services such as water, sanitation, electricity, and waste removal. We are also still dealing with the impact of the Bantu education system, which was designed to keep the black majority confined to unskilled labor. And going forward, he said, we should commit to working together further to implement the National Development Plan in dealing with remaining challenges and take our country forward. Mr. Zuma said the review was government's factual and frank account of how South Africa had fared since 1994, and that it was dedicated to former President Nelson Mandela, who died last December. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, in a recent visit to Sierra Leone, met with the President Ernest Bai Koroma. In the joint press conference afterwards, the Secretary General said that he had had very constructive discussion with President Koroma on a number of issues, including the continued cooperation between the United Nations and the government of Sierra Leone. He said that Sierra Leone represents one of the world's most successful cases of post-conflict recovery, peacekeeping, and peace building, with great strides taken towards peace, stability, and long-term development. The Secretary General met with representatives of the 10 main political parties in Sierra Leone, as well as with representatives of civil society. He also attended the ceremony marking the closure of the United Nations Integrated Peace-Building Office. And in his remarks, Ban Ki-moon said that Sierra Leone had taught the world many lessons, but none more important than the power of people to shape the future. He added that here we see a strong investment in material resources, human energy, international support, and national goodwill that can bring lasting peace. Law enforcement officials in Dominica have admitted that a gun amnesty launched in the country a few years ago has failed. The gun amnesty, which was spearheaded by the government of Dominica, was geared towards persons with illegal firearms. These people were asked to bring their firearms to the police and would not face any charges. Only 2 persons, however, turned their firearms into the police. Speaking after a series of gun-related incidents over the past few months, Assistant Superintendent Inspector Claude Weeks made further appeal to young individuals who own illegal firearms to hand them over. He warned that the police will spare no effort in recovery of these firearms, saying, "We are sending a strong message. Please comply with the police." Police Superintendent David Andrews said the failure of the gun amnesty has forced police to develop a new strategy. And in fact, he said using the new method, in a year, as many as 22 unlawful, unlicensed firearms were identified, located, and seized. He said this is an intelligence-driven methodology that's bearing great fruit. And now to sports. With approximately 90 days to the start of the 2014 FIFA World Cup in Brazil, the Nigeria Football Federation (NFF) has announced that it faces a deficit in its budget for the participation of the Super Eagles in the tournament. The NFF budgeted 2.084 billion naira, approximately $12.5 million, for the global tournament. Indications are that the government will only give the federation 1.2 billion naira, leaving a shortfall of 829.9 million naira. That's about $4.99 million. The NFF has therefore asked the federal legislature for assistance in getting the full sum needed for the Nigerian team's participation. NFF scribe Musa Amadu made the request when he appeared before the House of Representatives Committee on Sports on Monday in Abuja. He submitted that the amount the government is releasing will only take the Super Eagles to the round of 16 match in terms of bonuses to be paid, air tickets, esticos, preparations, and the like. The NFF budget covers the allowances for players and officials, winning bonuses, flight tickets, accommodation, and others. Each member of the team will receive $10,000 as winning bonus during the group stage, $12,500 during the second round, and $15,000 in the quarterfinals. Coach Stephen Kesh's winning bonus is $20,000 for the group stage, $22,500 for the second round, and $25,000 for the last 8. Nigeria is one of 5 African countries billed to participate at the month-long football tournament starting in June in Brazil. Also on the World Cup, the president of the Confederation of African Football, CAF, Mr. Issa Hayatu, celebrating 26 years, has expressed that what will be the icing on the cake for him after all his achievements would be to get more successes for African football. He expressed optimism that Africa's 5 representatives to this year's tournament in Brazil, the Desert Foxes of Algeria, Cameroon's Indomitable Lions, the Elephants of Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana's Black Stars and Nigeria's Super Eagles, could reach the semi-finals or even the final of the World Cup during his time as president. Only 3 African teams, Cameroon, Ghana and Senegal, have ever reached the quarterfinal of the FIFA World Cup since Africa's first representation at the 1934 World Cup in Italy by Egypt. Ayanle Sulaiman has won Djibouti's first gold medal at the 2014 IAAF World Indoor Championships in Sopot, Poland. The mid-distance runner scored the brilliant gold medal with a final time of 3:37.52 in the men's 1500 final. Ayanle, 21, who said he started running after watching the Olympics in 2008, said he's looking forward to 2016, where he will make his Olympic debut in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It was a pleasure bringing you News Bits, and I do want to thank you for staying with us. Stay connected with us on Facebook at Fuxion TV ATL and at Twitter at Fuxion TV ATL. We hope to see you again next time. Until then, stay safe.